Hi guys, my name is Marina and I'm here again with Main Idea to teach you more about cartooning. So the first video we did was cartoon portraits and what goes into making a cartoon character. The second video we did was expressions in Eminata, where we took one cartoon character that we made and we made them express different emotions using these tips and tricks. The video today, we'll be going over comic strips and specifically 3-panel comics. We're going to go over the different types of transitions from panel to panel. We're going to go over scripting. We're going to go over speech bubbles. So what you'll need today is a writing or drawing utensil. I'm again going to be using this black colored pencil. I also have my sharpener and eraser if need be. You can use a marker, you can use a pen, you can use a regular pencil, you can use whatever you have on hand. You also need some coloring materials. I'm going to be using these colored pencils that I've been using. You're also going to need this sheet that was either sent to you or you can find on the Main Idea Facebook or Instagram page. You're also going to need a sheet of paper if you want to take notes. If you don't want to, you can continue just doing it on this page. So the first step for creating a comic strip is deciding what type of transitions you want your comic strip to have. So let's go over the different type of transitions now. Here I drew up some examples for the different transitions, and there's 5 main ones that are used very commonly that I'm going to go over. So the first type is moment-to-moment transitions. And the example I hear is someone falling asleep. So moment-to-moment transitions means that in between each panel is an extremely small amount of time passing. So that means in between each panel in what we call the gutter, in these empty spaces, that means that the reader has to put less mental energy into figuring out what's happening in between each panel. So this can last from 1 minute to 1 second. So in this example I have where my character is falling asleep, what happens in the first one is that their eyes are open, then their eyes are slowly shutting, and then their eyes are closed and they're falling asleep. The second type is action to action, which involves one subject doing a different action in each panel, but stays within one scene. And this requires a little bit of reader input to fill in what's happening in the gutters, but altogether it makes sense. So in this first one, I have my character holding a cup of some liquid. The second one, they're drinking the liquid. The third one, they cough. So obviously we know what's happening here, but there's a little more than 1 second happening in between each panel. The third one we have here is subject to subject. Now, subject to subject means that you're focusing on multiple subjects within one scene or idea. So this subject to subject one I have right here is the first panel is the character is brushing their teeth. The second one, they're eating some bowl of stuff. The third one, they're at a bus stop with a backpack on. Now, we can reasonably assume that this person is getting ready for school or work. So, these have different subjects. It is one character, but has different subjects, whereas this one is brushing their teeth, this one is eating, and this one's waiting at a bus stop, but still within the one theme of getting ready for school, the one idea of getting ready to school. And this requires a little bit more reader input than the last one. So it's kind of building off of each other. So moment to moment is the smallest amount of time in the gaps. Action to action is a little bit of time. Subject to subject is even a little more bit of time. And then scene to scene requires the most amount of reader input to fill in what's happening in the gutters in between each panel. Now, scene to scene means that in each panel there is a significant difference of either physical location or of time. So for this one, I did the example of time and probably physical location. So in the first one, my character is a baby. The second one, they're an adult. The third one, they're an old person. So this one, it shows that there's literally decades in between each panel. And then the fifth one's a little different. The fifth one is what we call aspect to aspect. Aspect to aspect is different because no time passes in between each panel, which means that there's no time difference in each gutter. So with aspect to aspect, you're actually taking one moment in time as if it's completely frozen, and you're looking around at different parts of that one scene. So in this one, if we take the example of our moment-to-moment transitions where our character is asleep, this one we can start with that, where our character is asleep. You spin the camera to the left maybe, and there you see the window. Then you spin the camera some more, and you see the alarm clock and the cup of water on the nightstand. So this one, it's as if you paused real life and you're looking around at different things happening. So it's all these different details of one scene that all exist in the same exact moment. So just to recap that, our first one was moment to moment, where there's the smallest amount of time in between each panel in the gutter. Action to action means that there's one subject throughout the whole strip, but different actions in each one. Subject to subject means that we're looking at different subjects in each panel, but it's all within the same scene or idea. Scene to scene is when there's a significant amount of time or space that passes in between each panel. And then aspect to aspect is when you're looking at different details in one singular moment and there's no time change. The specific examples I have on this handout sheet is moment to moment. I have this person blinking, which is as simple as eyes open, eyes closed. Action to action, much like the other example I showed you, someone drinking a cup of water. Subject to subject, a phone is ringing and someone picks it up. Scene to scene, this person is an adult and then this person is an older adult. Aspect to aspect, this one is a leaf on the ground and then this one is looking up at a tree branch. So the second one we have is scripting, and you can actually write right on the sheet. So for this one, just like there's 3 panels in a 3-panel comic strip, that sets us up perfectly to have a beginning, middle, and end for the comic. So what you want to think about is just like how every story has a beginning, middle, and end, so does each comic strip. Even if it's moment to moment, the beginning, middle, and end for that first example I showed you would be the beginning is the person is awake. The middle is the person's falling asleep. The end is the person is asleep. So what you want to think about is what you want your comic to be about, for one thing, and then how you can break that up simply into beginning, middle, and end script. Now on your paper, go ahead and write what you want. You can pause the video and take a moment to think. I'm also going to pause my recording and take a minute to think about what I want in those. And I'll be right back with you. So I just filled mine out. If you need more time, you can keep pausing the video if you want. So I decided on doing an action to action comic. And action to action is where there is one scene and one subject and they're doing a different action in each scene. So this one I came up with, the beginning is a character's licking an ice cream cone. The middle is the ice cream scoop falls off the cone and splats on the ground. The third one is the person's head falls off the body like their ice cream and comedically splats on the ground. So this is just mine. That's an action to action one. If you want, you can print out multiple of these and then do different ones, different transition types or just different scripts. And the last thing before we actually draw the comic is we want to look at speech bubbles if needed. So the different speech bubbles. So this one right here, these are just some examples. This isn't all encompassing. These are just some good examples to help get you thinking about the speech bubbles. So this one right here is a robot type speech bubble. It's very boxy, kind of more electronic. So this can be used if anyone is speaking out of an electronic speaker. And that could range from robot to an overhead system, or it can be a cell phone. So again, that's just a box, very angular, and then a very angular tail. And then the tail should always be pointing from the person that is talking. And then it helps if you have a little robotic, square, angular text. This one is a very big speech bubble with the word that fills up the speech bubble. That indicates that someone is being loud, especially if you do these sort of bubble letters. You can tell that they're being loud. This one down here is the opposite of the robot type. This is a perfect circle with a tail, and this one shows that someone's being really bubbly, really upbeat, really giggly. This one is still a big speech bubble, but then really tiny text. And then I put this in asterisks, which are these little stars right there, to show emphasis, show that this text is somehow different than the regular text. So with tiny text, it makes you assume that the person is being quieter because smaller things we associate with being quieter. This one is a really gunky, kind of dripping, droopy speech bubble, kind of like the Goosebumps logo. This one is good for if you have spooky text, you know, anything scary, someone telling a horror story, someone telling a threat, something like that. One right below it, very spiky, again, very angular, but more chaotic than the robot type. This is if someone's angry. And again, I did all caps. I underlined it and then I did an exclamation mark. This one over in the corner, this is very fancy and it has the twirls and the little cloud-like shapes and these little flower type shapes in it too with the cursive. And that's if someone's being fancy. Like if you imagine someone putting on a really like pretentious fancy voice, that's what you could think of. This one right here is really long and drawn out and angular but rounded to show that it's not a robot, it's actually just a naturalistic character. And for this one, I put the spacing in between the letters a lot bigger to show that someone's kind of like drawing out their text, like they're talking really slowly and it's about something really boring, like if you ever had like a really boring lecture in school. Some other things to think about with speech bubbles. I just have some different examples here. So this one over in this corner, here we just have two simple stick figure characters, right? And then for this purpose, I gave them a little flower in between. So because we as a Western nation read from left to right, then you always want to start your speech bubbles and the first character speaking in your strip to come from the left. So if you see here, then our first character talking is left, then underneath, right character speaking, and then left again. So we read left to right, and then we read from up down. Now, if you're coming from a different culture, this is especially true in manga, they read right to left, so it would be completely opposite. But because I'm teaching Western comics and that's what I know best, I'm going to teach it this way. So from this, we can move on down to this. This is if you zoom in on the object in between them, but these characters are still talking. So what you can do is actually do speech bubbles that trail off the page, that come from off screen. And you can see that because of the positioning of the speech bubbles, you still know which stick figure is talking in this one. So if you have a character in a panel on the left, you want to keep them on the left for the entire scene. And if you have a character on the right, you want to keep them on the right for the entire scene. So this one, you can still see it's the left character talking. This one, it's still the right character talking. If you crisscross them, it'd be very confusing and your audience wouldn't know which character is speaking at that time. This one is if our character on the left begins talking and then our character on the right interrupts them. So that can be shown by their speech bubble actually overlaying theirs. And that can show like they're actually interrupting them. They're talking over this person's words. This one is like the loud speech bubble I did down here. So this one is if your character is really tiny and you want your speech bubble to fill up a lot of page. You can shrink down your character using perspective and then make the speech bubble big and make them yell. On the opposite end, we have our whisper that I showed you earlier. This is if your character is probably bigger in panel using perspective. And then you have a bigger speech bubble, but then the tinier text in it. And the reason we do this is because if we did a tiny speech bubble with tiny text, it'd be a lot harder for the audience to read. These are two different ways to show a crowd that is talking. So this first one up here, you see these different stems coming from different points in the crowd, but they're all saying the same thing. So that shows like if a crowd is chanting or talking in unison, then they're all saying the same thing at the same time. This one down here is speech bubbles overlapping, coming from different parts of the crowd, different sizes. And this generally would have different things in each speech bubble. And that shows that the crowd is being very loud, talking over each other, kind of disorganized. So now that we've gone over the different transition types, the scripting, and the speech bubbles, we can start working on drawing and coloring our comic. So keep in mind, what style you chose, moment to moment, action to action, subject to subject, scene to scene, or aspect to aspect, the scripting that you did, and the speech bubbles if needed. You don't necessarily need speech bubbles in a comic strip. And for the purpose of this exercise, you don't need to focus on technical skills. You really need to just focus on the setup of paneling. You can use stick figures if you want. You can use squares. You can use blobs that are labeled. It's up to you. We're not really focusing on the level of experience with drawing that we have right now. So go ahead and start working on your comic. If you want, you can pause the video. I'm going to be working on my comic too, and then I'll speed it up for you guys. Okay, so I just finished drawing my comic. The next step is to color it, but I just wanted to show you something. So the first one, I drew the person licking the cone, then I made it fall off, and I actually changed my script a little bit. The punchline for this one is that the person licking the ice cream was actually a bigger ice cream that mimicked the same thing. So it's okay if you change your script while you're going through with the comic. That's actually part of the process, is editing and reworking. So next, I'm just going to color it, and you color yours, and then I'll catch back up with you. So here is my finished comic strip. I just colored it in. I added a very basic light background color to not overwhelm the panels. Um, I also added this little sound effect splat, and then a bigger splat. Then I added these motion lines, which are also Emanata. These motion lines to show that it's falling, and then, of course, splatting on the bottom. All right, so that's what I have for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you tune in for the next video. All right, thank you.